Hey everyone, I'm Anthony Cosgrove, the co-founder of Harbr, and today I'm joined by Benford, who is the founder of Datent, where he's creating the world's first support system for data entrepreneurs. We're going to be talking a lot more on that in just a moment. Prior to Datent, Benny was working as the CDO for Jaguar Land Rover, so heaps of experience. Benny, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to this.
Awesome, me too. Let's start with Datent. Tell us more about what you're doing there.
So I got really frustrated as a CDO. It's quite common startup advice that startups are hard. If you want to do a startup, solve a problem that frustrates you in the world. Data transformations don't succeed often enough. I was very lucky to work on one that did. And then a bunch of my peers who were working on similar, quite transformative transformations all said we're solving the same problems. And that just sounds really inefficient. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's not true elsewhere. If you're doing something like rolling out a CRM, there's a playbook for it. If you're merging two organizations, there's a playbook for it. If you're changing an HR function, you're a member of an HR professional body that tells you what a modern HR function looks like. The data world keeps reinventing itself. So I'm creating a organization, a system to support people who want to change their companies to become more data driven, solve the problems that are common to data transformation. So they just need to work on what's special to about their organization.
Perfect. And kind of within that, you've kind of used the term entrepreneur. You
Yeah.
just sort of break that down a little bit because it's quite different to helping people with data transformations. It kind of suggests there's a sort of a value driver or maybe even a commercial component to the work they're doing and their objectives.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think it's a term that's not used enough. Entrepreneurs don't accept the status quo in their organization, and they don't particularly accept their job being what their job title is and what the description is. Like an entrepreneur doesn't accept status quo in the market and they go and build something different. The difference is they do it with inside an organization. So often they're the people who to start with might set up a new team or function, but then they try and change things within the organization to improve the organization in ways that are measurable about what matters to the organization. And that's quite cryptic language because the more I've been doing this, the more I've stepped back from the word deliver returns, because actually I know data entrepreneurs in the nonprofit world, and improving their organization is around improving impact from a social perspective. So it's about delivering people using data to improve how their organization delivers whatever their organization has been set up to do in a better way.
Perfect. And sort of pull the conversation into kind of data products and kind of what's going on there. You were actually quoted in the last podcast by Caroline talking about this idea of delivering incremental value. So deliver a new insight sort of frequently so that people can start to see value as they go on that journey. Probably something I suspect that you're encouraging those entrepreneurs to do as well. Kind of talk us through kind of what you see as the outcomes of those transformational kind of
Products.
like is it products, is it not products, is it how would you go about this, like is it a data product, is it not, and if not, why not?
You've asked a lot of questions there. Um, so let's try and do the split. I don't think everything has to be a product. A product has an ongoing service obligation. You've got a whole product lifecycle. You've got to maintain it because there's a user base for it. They're expecting it. Things will fall apart if it's no longer there. That's not true of everything. There is and always will be a continuing role for tactical analysis. Let's imagine, like in the most obvious use case, if your company is considering buying another organization, there is lots of data work to do to help understand whether that's a good thing, help with the process of merger, bring the organizations together. That's not a product. That's a one-off piece of data analysis that can add lots of tangible value. Products, you have an ongoing service agreement with. So if you create an algorithm, the most disruptive product that was built whilst I was at JLR from a data product perspective specified the specification of vehicles that went to retailers around the world. So there's more ways to permutate a JLR vehicle than there are grains of sand. seem statistic, but it's true. Seat color, paint color, sound system, stereo, like type of roof, all of this stuff. So actually, an algorithm to set based on what we understand on market demand, what is the right stock to hold in each retailer, that an algorithm did that. And it's a product because there's an ongoing obligation. It's if you took that away, all of the processes the organization had prior to that to manage vehicle specification and supply chain were no longer in place, and things would fall apart. So a product needs some form of ongoing require service to the organization. And I guess the main question you were trying to ask was around, and I've just asked all the peripheral ones, was around value. How do you measure value? And it's down to what matters to the organization, but it needs to be quantifiable and measurable, and it needs to be an outcome, not an input or an output. So what you should be measuring from products are not the number of reports you developed, even the number of users. That's all outputs. It should be outcomes, like what's the improvement to profit of the organization, to revenue per vehicle, what's the improvement to customer satisfaction. Are you tightening your supply chain? In which case, how many fewer days are there in your supply chain? They should be measurable outcomes. And without measurable outcomes, I don't think you have a product, which we can go off on one. But I could go back to. I'm going to pause there. I'll pause there.
Okay, cool. So when you're kind of talking to the entrepreneurs trying to drive this change, are you thinking kind of product? Are you thinking tactical analysis, or are you no? Let's start with the value. Let's start with the value that we're looking to achieve, and kind of work back from there. Like, how does that work?
Start with the outcome. Don't worry too much about what the outcome is you start to measure. You can always change your outcome measure. So in some organizations, I've seen people waste time debating what outcomes matter most to the organization. Just get started. You can always change your value measures. So choose an outcome. It might be profit. It might be, there are some really good charities in this place. There's a charity I love called the Robin Hood Foundation, which has a tagline, "Fight poverty like a New Yorker," and they fight poverty with algorithms, and so their measure of an outcome is alleviation of poverty. So that it's a measurable thing that your organization goes, yes, our purpose is to do X, our purpose is to make profit, to improve customers' lives, to improve poverty in these areas. It's a measurable outcome. And then once you've got that, and you've got an idea about that various people agree on, that it's likely that will improve your outcomes, you then, and then this is Caroline's point, work relentlessly on iterations and MVPs. So data should, and the reason for, and this is very much similar to the entrepreneur's problem. Entrepreneurs come up with a business problem that they want to solve for the market. A bad entrepreneur then goes and spends 4 years building a product and then goes to the market and goes, "Is this what you want?" A good entrepreneur goes and starts testing with customers. Does this advert? Oh, no, I didn't quite understand the problem. And then you deviate, you change your plan. You should be doing the same as an entrepreneur with your products and aiming each sprint to go, how can I improve that outcome? And clearly at the beginning, it's not an automated algorithm, but at the beginning, you should have a customer that's making decisions in your organization. And you should be stretching yourself to every sprint go, can I provide more information to them such that at the end of this sprint, they understand their decision-making environment better and are able to make a better decision? And then the reason why that's so important is not just early value delivery, you learn. Because if you give information to your stakeholder that, let's come up with a simple example, your stakeholder's trying to reduce stock levels in an organization, and you give them some information that you all think will help improve stock management, and it turns out your stakeholder does nothing with it, you've learned something. You've learned that actually this information doesn't help them to make better decisions. So you then have a discussion about what would and wouldn't help, and then you actually prove what problem you should be solving quantitatively before you go too far in product development and develop the wrong thing.
Perfect. And I mean, we spoke about this earlier, but it feels like there's something inherent in there as well around sort of problem selection. So certain problems sort of certainly being solvable, but the opportunity cost of solving that problem versus solving something else just makes it not worthwhile. Could you share like a little bit more around like your thinking into how to work through that, particularly if you're iterating through a problem, right? You might think it's a $100 million problem to solve, and as you get into it and you iterate through and learn all the lessons you just said, it turns out it's a $10 million problem or a $1 million problem. So
Yeah, so I think you're right. I think one of the reasons people struggle with strategy right now is technology has made so much possible that there's an abundance of opportunity.
mm,
And if you're not focused as an organization, you look at things and say, well, that's a good opportunity, let's do it. And you end up working on lots of things that are good opportunities, but they might not be the best opportunity.
mm,
If you have a process up front to value how much do we think this problem's worth for us to solve, how hard do we think it will be to solve, you've then got the ability to size, well, we've said this is a £10 million opportunity, a £100 million opportunity, let's work on the 100 one, or we think this is a problem that's going to alleviate poverty for 100 people, this one will alleviate poverty for 1,000 people, or we think this one's going to help improve stock control in one country, this in 10 countries. So you work out the level of impact your problem is going to have, and then you focus on the ones that are going to have the largest impact on what you care about. And in order to do that, you want to move fast. You don't want to move into this world of needing to do huge amount of upfront work. So you really just need 3 people to agree on a value estimation. Someone from the business area that's going to make a decision, someone from the data team that's responsible for the data product, and someone independent to kind of hold you both to account. Otherwise, those 2 people could just decide to work on a hobby project. So someone independent from somewhere like an audit team or finance to go yes, or a transformation team, your assumptions are reasonable. And then you all admit to humbly go into a learning environment to go, based on what we know now, let's see what we know in 2 sprints time, in 4 sprints time. Do we know any more? Do we still think it's a £100 million problem? Do we still think it's relatively easy to work on? And be ready to kill projects quickly if it turns out that the value isn't as high as you thought, or if the complexity is much higher than you realize. So you're regularly reassessing your portfolio to work on the things that have the highest likelihood of delivering impact.
Awesome. And this next question might just be a bit moot, because like the whole business of Datent is really, you sharing kind of critical lessons that you've learned, and you've already shared some of those with us just in the last 10 minutes. But if you were to kind of give advice to your younger self, like starting out in data transformation, data product management, what would be the critical things that you would share?
Build a network.
That's not what I was expecting.
Don't try and solve everything. Data people like solving problems. It's one of the things that attracts people to the field. As a result, one of the most common problems I see in data people is they love reinventing the wheel. So find out what's already been solved, use it, and work on what's unique to your organization. Build a network, learn from as many people as you can, and get started. And don't reinvent the wheel.
Awesome. And for those listening who are maybe in that position and kind of starting out, kind of where have you found the best places to do that learning, to build that network?
This sounds self-serving. This is why I've created Datent, because I didn't think there was a good network.
Okay.
And to explain what I mean by that, as a CDO, I was flattered with how many networks I was invited to join that were beneficial. Almost exclusively, all of them said, this is a network for CDOs, to which my response was, but I'm not the transformation leader. I have about 15 to 20 transformation leaders. How do they benefit and share, exchange knowledge? Oh, that's someone else's problem.
Right.
So, and I think trying to change a business is such a big problem. You need a community that involves much more than the top role. I hate the hierarchy concept. So that said, there are obviously good networks. Go to events like Big Data London. There are free events. Whatever your largest tech vendors are, get involved in their communities, whether you're a Snowflake house, an AWS house, got the AWS conferences on at the moment. Get involved in communities and learn from the outside world. There's there's enough problems to work on to not waste your time solving problems that have already been solved.
Awesome, great advice, and quite different to stuff we've heard before, which is very cool. So, within Datent, you are at this, I guess, a bit of a vanguard in terms of entrepreneurs trying to solve hopefully new problems and not reinvent the wheel. Technology continues to grind forward. Cloud, Gen AI. Focusing more and more, I think, on a very broad church of data consumers using data in their everyday roles, whereas 10 years ago they wouldn't necessarily have done that or really had any affinity for it. So we're sort of in an interesting position at the moment. You're in a very interesting position to actually kind of see kind of what's coming next. So, like, what do you think that's going to look like? Kind of where are data products heading? Where is data generally heading? What does that look like?
So from a tech space, don't worry about tech. Look at some of the most inspirational stories that have hung around for a long time in the data space, the Amazon recommendation algorithm, the Netflix recommendation algorithm. Both of those stories are 20 years old.
Mm.
And they're probably achieved a lot more for their organizations than most companies, most highest impact data product is achieving today. And they achieved it with the technology that was available 20 years ago. So don't worry too much about tech to start with. First, prove that you've identified the problems that are worth solving for your organization. And when you've got as far as you can get on solving those problems and driving impact in those areas with your existing tech stack, then you understand the problem you're solving well enough to look at new tech. And then you bring in new tech. Technology is a distraction. So that's the first thing I would say. And it's reasonably common advice. I can't remember who it was when I picked up data governance. There was a really good data governance book I read that almost every chapter in the book, do not buy data governance technology until you've had a data governance program for at least 12 months, because you just don't understand what you're doing enough.
Yep.
So first get started with your problem. Technology is a distraction, and then look at the technology, and then you'll be much better placed to understand what technology you need. But that doesn't entirely answer your question of what's coming next. I think I hope that the data world starts to become more professionalized, because it's not. The best analogy I can come up with where I think data is, I think the data profession now is very similar to where software development was in the late 90s. So in the late 90s, there weren't common standards for your software development lifecycle, for how you did code management, all of those great things. If you're standing up a software team today, you wouldn't invent any of your processes around code management from scratch. You'd copy from a whole range of different frameworks that are available out there. A lot of data teams today start from scratch. So what I hope is happening in the next 5 to 10 years, and Datent will play a part in, is producing frameworks so that there are common ways of doing data that you then modify to your organization, and data becomes professionalized, whereas at the moment it's not a profession.
Cool. And do you see those two things as linked? Because I think in your first point, you're talking about like not getting swept up in technology and kind of almost data being, I don't want to say necessarily its own like distinct discipline, but just being very tightly coupled with business value, as opposed to being tightly coupled with a technology. And you mentioned earlier, there's so much opportunity now because there is so much technology that can be quite challenging if you don't have discipline around where's my value, and how would I use this to actually deliver the value that is most important to me right now. So that's sort of being your first point. And then the second point being this sort of professionalization of the industry and kind of industry standards and starting to kind of leverage, increasingly large foundation of work that's already been done, things that haven't been reinvented. So do you see those two things as linked?
I think they are. I think the data profession overly defines itself around technology and therefore struggles to stabilize because it's always chasing its tail to go, oh my God, a new thing's arrived, everything's changed.
Right.
And other people don't do that. And other areas are being impacted by technology as much. I mean, look at a warehouse. Warehouses are being largely automated, but that doesn't mean that the profession of warehouse management and logistics has not defined itself. It has defined itself. It's a well-established profession. There are professional bodies for logistics. Or take supply chain in a similar way. Graph technology is going to completely revolutionize supply chain and enable digital twins to happen in a different way. But they're not sat there going, we're a technology profession and we can't come up with standards because there's more technology coming in. They're going, no, we're a supply chain profession. So I think data needs to, and this is, I very, very strongly believe CDOs and data teams cannot report to technology leads for this reason. It's confusing the problem. It's really, really confusing the problem, and getting it hooked up. The data is tech. Data is completely different to tech. Everyone is dependent on technology, but no one else has made the mistake of thinking they are a technology area as a result.
That's super interesting. And just one very quick final question, because this came up in the second podcast with Patrick. So if data is not reporting into technology, where would you see it reporting into?
At the moment, for most organizations, my preference list would be Chief Transformation Officer first, because the way in which data works needs to change radically and it needs to be linked to the organization's priorities. So if there is a Chief Transformation Officer, it's ideal. Second would be either the CFO or COO, because they actually have an enterprise-wide remit, and most roles don't. So when you end up with a CDO reporting to a chief commercial officer, for instance, or customer officer, as happens in some instance, it's a weird thing because their remit is functional, whereas a CDO's remit should be enterprise-wide. So yeah, so I'd say chief transformation officer followed by a CFO or COO.
Awesome, which chimes pretty nicely with what Patrick said as well. And having observed kind of different reporting lines leading to different outcomes, he kind of landed on the CFO being a great kind of change agent for data. And also I think kind of looking at it in the way that you described as a value driver. And what can I do with this asset in order to change kind of valuable outcomes for our organization? Awesome. Cool. Well, look, we're going to have to stop there, but that has been jam-packed and super interesting. Thank you so much for joining us. For those who are listening and are now hopefully super intrigued by data entrepreneurship, visit datent.com and you can learn more there. And if you're interested in setting up a commercial or enterprise data marketplace, check out harbrdata.com. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for inviting me.